No one tells you this, but your mind isn't loud because it's smart. It's loud because it's cluttered. You think you're thinking, but really, you're just sorting noise. You call it ambition, hustle, alertness. But underneath all that movement is a man who's never really been still. There's a room inside your mind that most people never enter. It's not flashy, not productive. It doesn't cheer for your goals or remind you of deadlines. It just waits, quietly, like a sacred space covered in dust. Most men never step into that room. They live in reaction mode, scanning, fixing, proving always, running from something invisible. But silence confronts you with yourself. It strips away the scripts, the noise, the ego. It leaves you exposed, unfiltered. And that's terrifying, because without the distractions, you're left alone with the one person you've been avoiding, yourself. Stillness is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's the re-entry point to the man you were before the world told you who to be. And yes, it feels awkward at first, unproductive, even painful. But in that pain is the purge. And in that purge is power. Because when you finally stand still, you stop being a puppet of your past. Before we dive deeper, let me ask you this. When was the last time your mind was completely quiet? Not numb, not distracted, just still. Let me know in the comments. I read everyone, because your silence could inspire someone else to begin, someone who's still drowning in noise and calling it normal. Here's the truth. When you finally open that quiet door, the world starts moving differently. You stop chasing, and things begin to arrive. You stop reacting, and your life starts responding. And for the first time, you realize it was never about doing more. It was about hearing what's already here, beneath the noise. Welcome to that room. It's time to clean it out. Not for perfection, but for peace. Why your mind is always loud. You wake up, and the noise starts immediately, not outside, but inside. Thoughts you didn't invite, conversations that never happened, regrets from yesterday, scenarios for tomorrow, a to-do list that stretches into infinity. You check your phone before you even check in with yourself. And suddenly the volume is cranked up to max. By the time you're brushing your teeth, you're already overwhelmed, and the day hasn't even started yet. But here's the part no one talks about. Most of that noise, it's not yours. It's recycled, replayed, installed, without permission. You think you're thinking, but most of the time, you're just rerunning what the world fed you yesterday. And the day before, and every day before that. News alerts, expectations, unfinished conversations, insecurities. Every voice but your own. You wonder why you're tired before lunch, why your energy feels hijacked, why it's hard to focus, to create, to feel. The answer isn't outside. It's not your job. It's not your phone. It's the clutter inside your mind. You've never been taught how to filter it. So everything gets in. Everything becomes urgent. Everything gets a reaction. But when everything is loud, nothing is clear. And when nothing is clear, you start to doubt yourself. Here's the truth most people avoid. A cluttered mind doesn't just exhaust. It weakens you. It makes you reactive, emotional, sloppy. You don't lead your thoughts. You follow them. You don't decide your day. You chase it. And somewhere in the noise, You lose the quiet part of yourself, the one that knows, the one that doesn't need to scroll, argue, compare, or explain, the one that sees through chaos and chooses peace anyway. The Stoics had a wordless wisdom for this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Your thoughts are those waves, constant, crashing, demanding attention. But you don't have to be swept away. You can be the rock. You can be still, not because the noise disappears, but because you finally understand. You are not the noise. Silence isn't about sound. It's about space. Space between the waves. Space between the thought and the reaction. Space to notice that not every voice deserves your attention. Not every urgency is yours to solve. Not every thought is true just because it showed up in your head. So why is your mind always loud? Because you've been living in a world that celebrates noise and calls it momentum. Because slowing down looks like weakness in a culture obsessed with performance. Because no one taught you how to think clearly, they just taught you how to respond quickly. But now you know, the loudness isn't natural. It's habitual. And the more you react to it, the more you feed it. But silence breaks the pattern. It's not passive. It's surgical. Every moment you choose stillness, you reclaim 1 inch of mental territory. Every time you don't engage the noise, you prove to yourself that peace is a practice, not a gift. And eventually, with discipline and distance, something strange begins to happen. The noise doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. And for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like a prisoner inside your own head. You feel steady. You feel like yourself again. Or maybe for the first time ever. Thought loops, the noise you mistake for thinking. There's a kind of thinking that feels productive. You pace. You replay. You analyze. You tell yourself you're processing. You believe you're solving something, but you're not. You're just looping, thinking the same thoughts in the same order, tied to the same emotions you've been carrying for years. You're not thinking, you're recycling, and it's subtle. That's what makes it dangerous. Because the loop feels familiar, it gives the illusion of control. Like if you replay that conversation one more time, maybe you'll rewrite how it ended. If you reimagine that argument, maybe you'll find the line you should have said. If you revisit that mistake again and again, maybe you'll finally make peace with it. But you never do. You just go in circles, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, but without progress. This is the first kind of mental clutter, the thought loop. It wears the disguise of introspection, but delivers none of its rewards. You mistake it for awareness, but it keeps you asleep. It doesn't want resolution. It wants repetition, and your brain, wired for efficiency, gives it to you. Because what's familiar feels safe even if it's slowly breaking you down. Every time you feed the loop, it grows stronger. The neural path deepens. The emotional trigger strengthens. And you start mistaking overthinking for intelligence. You start confusing analysis with growth. But here's the truth. A thought repeated without action isn't wisdom. It's noise. And the more you cling to it, the less you're here, present, focused, free. Epictetus warned us long ago, if a person gave away your body to some passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along. Most people would never let a stranger live rent-free in their home. but they let an insult from years ago repeat in their mind every single night. They let a voice from childhood, a parent, a teacher, an ex replay on autopilot without ever stopping to ask, do I even believe this anymore? Does this thought serve me? This is where silence becomes your scalpel, not to kill the thoughts, but to observe them, to sit with them without feeding them, to let them rise and fall without chasing or resisting. It's in that stillness that you begin to notice the difference between thinking and looping. And once you see it, you can interrupt it. You don't need to fix the thought. You don't need to wrestle it to the ground. You just need to name it. This is a loop. And then you do something radical. You don't engage. You don't explain. You don't defend. You walk away. You put your attention elsewhere. You take a deep breath. You return to what's real. What's now? What's yours to command? Because here's the truth. Most of your thought loops aren't even yours. They were installed, conditioned, passed down. And they've been running unchallenged for years, creating emotional fog, decision fatigue, and an illusion of busyness. But the real cost? They keep you from building something new, something cleaner, something true. When you stop mistaking the loop for insight, something powerful happens. You reclaim your mental bandwidth. You feel space again. You notice that not all thoughts deserve a seat at your table, that you don't owe every memory a conversation. That silence isn't empty, it's available. And in that availability, clarity returns. Creativity reawakens. Peace slips in without asking. Because once you remove the looping noise, life doesn't have to be forced anymore. It just flows. It always has. You were just too tangled in repetition to feel it. Emotional dust, the feelings you keep storing. You've cleaned your house before. You've opened a closet and found things you forgot you owned buried in the back, covered in dust. An old box of memories, a cracked photo frame, a coat you swore you'd wear again, but never did. And for a moment, you pause. You didn't know it was still there. You didn't realize how long it had been weighing down the shelf. Now imagine opening that same closet, but in your mind, and what you find isn't clutter made of objects. It's made of moments you never processed, words you never answered, feelings you never let yourself fully feel, resentment you folded neatly and stored away, regret you sealed up and promised to deal with later, shame you tucked behind a smile and hoped no one would notice. You didn't throw them out, you just hid them. And now they've been there so long, you've mistaken them for furniture. This is the second kind of mental clutter, emotional dust. Not dramatic pain, not fresh wounds, just low-grade heaviness that lingers quietly in the background of your life. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It clouds your decisions. It slows your energy. It shows up in your tone, your posture, your hesitation. And the worst part, you've lived with it so long. You think it's part of you, but it's not. It's what you've refused to release. Seneca said it clearly, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of your pain doesn't come from what happened. It comes from how long you've carried it. Because emotions don't dissolve just because you ignore them. They store. They settle, and if you never sit with them, they'll sit in you until your joy feels muted and your days feel heavier than they should. Some men don't cry, not because they're strong, but because they're full of unspoken grief, full of disappointments, They minimized. Full of apologies, they never gave themselves permission to say. They bury the emotion. But burying doesn't mean healing. It means dragging emotional weight through every conversation, every choice, every attempt at connection, and wondering why nothing feels clean. That's where silence becomes sacred. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence that represses, but the silence that holds space. The kind of silence where you stop explaining, stop escaping, and just sit with what hurts. Not to fix it, not to dramatize it, just to finally witness it. When you do this, when you give your emotional dust the dignity of attention, it begins to shift. The shame softens. The regret reshapes into wisdom. The grief becomes gratitude for what mattered. You realize you're not broken. You're just cluttered. And what feels like emotional weight is often just emotional backlog. What's one feeling you've carried too long but never said out loud? Name it in the comments. Owning it is how you reclaim power. You don't need to heal everything in a day, but you do need to stop pretending you're fine when you're just functioning. You need to stop piling new goals on top of old wounds. You need to stop avoiding the quiet just because it reminds you of what you haven't processed. Because inside that quiet, that's where real strength lives. Not in pretending you're untouchable, but in finally letting go of the things that touched you too deeply and stayed longer than they were meant to. Start small. One memory, one emotion, one moment you've avoided. Sit with it not as a victim, but as someone ready to clean house, because when the emotional dust clears, your energy changes, your presence sharpens, you speak less, but your words carry weight. You do less, but everything flows smoother. You stop trying to chase peace and start radiating it. That's the power of emotional clarity. That's the reward of inner housekeeping. And that is the gift waiting beneath the dust. Dopamine clutter. You're not distracted. You're stimulated. You say you're distracted, that you can't focus like you used to, that your attention span is shrinking and your thoughts scatter like sparks. But distraction isn't your problem. Stimulation is. Too much of it. Too often, with no silence between. You're not broken. You're flooded. Every ding, every scroll, every swipe delivers a hit. A microdose of novelty, a spike of dopamine, and your brain, ancient and efficient, learns fast. It doesn't crave meaning. It craves the hit, the feeling of being engaged, even if what you're engaging with is meaningless. So you scroll, not because you care, but because your nervous system is conditioned to chase. You check your phone, not because anything urgent is happening, but because your body's addicted to the possibility of urgency. It's not just apps. It's how you work, how you eat, how you rest. Always multitasking, always plugged in, always sipping stimulation like it's oxygen. And what happens when you live like that? You lose your baseline. Silence starts to feel uncomfortable. Boredom feels threatening. Stillness feels like failure. You mistake calm for emptiness. You mistake restlessness for ambition. You tell yourself you're just busy. But deep down, you feel fractured, fragmented, on edge and off-center. You're overfed but undernourished, wired but hollow. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That includes your attention, your inputs, your cravings. Because if you can't be alone without stimulation, You're not alone. You're dependent. You've outsourced your nervous system to an algorithm, and every time you try to return to yourself, you find nothing, just static, just the echo of a mind that hasn't had quiet in years. This is dopamine clutter. Not loud, not harmful in a single hit, but relentless in its layering. It builds slowly, notification by notification, click by click. And over time, it hijacks your capacity to be present, to think deeply, to feel clearly, to do anything without needing a second screen to make it tolerable. You weren't meant to live like this. You were meant to sink into moments, to listen fully, to work from a deep, uninterrupted well, to enjoy something without documenting it. But you can't do that if your brain is constantly jacked up on dopamine spikes, conditioned to chase the next ping, the next flash, the next update. This is where silence becomes a detox, not just spiritual but neurological, a cleansing of your cognitive palate, not a punishment, a reset. 5 minutes, 10, no music, no screen, just breath, just presence. At first, it'll feel wrong, like you're missing something, like you forgot to check. That's withdrawal. That's proof you're overstimulated. But sit through it. Let the discomfort surface. Let the nervous energy fidget its way out of your system. Don't fight it, observe it. Let your brain crash down from its artificial high, and what you'll notice, slowly, is a shift, a softening, a recalibration. Thoughts will slow. Senses will sharpen. Your body will start to trust that stillness isn't danger, it's home. From there, you begin to rebuild your attention like a muscle. You protect your focus like a resource. You stop giving your mind away for free. You stop letting stimulation become your default. And as the noise fades, you'll remember what clarity feels like, what original thought feels like, what you feel like without a screen telling you who to be. This is the real power of silence. Not silence as emptiness. Silence as space. Space for thought. Space for depth. Space for ideas to come to you, not because you chased them, but because you created the stillness where they could land. Let the noise pass. Let the hit go unchased. Let your mind unhook. You're not distracted. You're overstimulated. And silence is how you begin to return. Mental hoarding. Good ideas rot when you don't act. You're full of ideas. More than you admit. More than you act on. You've had sparks in the shower, insights during walks, flashes of brilliance at 2 a.m. that made you whisper, "I should write this down." And maybe you did. In notebooks, in notes apps, on napkins, half-formed dreams, business concepts, projects that would have changed something, maybe everything. But they never made it past the draft. You didn't follow through. Not because you didn't care, but because your mind was already crowded with too much to carry one more thing. This is the next layer of mental clutter, hoarded potential. The good stuff, the someday stuff, the kind you convince yourself you'll return to when you're ready, but you never do. Because clarity doesn't come from storing ideas, it comes from shipping them, from executing, even imperfectly, from making room by moving forward. But we don't. We consume, we collect, we binge books, courses, videos, podcasts, inspiration. We gather so much knowledge, we don't even remember what we've learned. And it becomes, wait not, wisdom. You mistake reading for building, planning for progress. You fill your shelves, your drives, your journals, but not your life. And the result? Paralysis dressed up as preparation. You weren't meant to be a warehouse for unused insights. You were meant to be a Vesalidias, come in, and if they matter, they move through you, into action, into expression, into form. But when you hoard, when you save inspiration like treasure, you're afraid to spend. It spoils, it rots, and it begins to whisper lies. You're not ready. You need more time. You need more input. You need permission. Now, you don't. What you need is movement, even a small one, a messy one. Anything that converts what's been circling in your head into something real, because ideas are not trophies. They're not status symbols. They're seeds, and if you don't plant them, they die. Epictetus said, "The greater the difficulty, the more glory in surmounting it." Skillful pilots gain their reputation from storms and tempests. That includes the internal storms. The ones that say, what if I fail? What if it's not good enough? What if no one cares? But silence gives you a chance to hear another voice. A quieter one. The one that says, what if this matters? What if it works? What if you just begin? You don't need a perfect plan. You need a cleared table. You need to stop piling more mental furniture into a room that's already too full to walk through. You need to stop pretending that knowledge alone will transform you. Only action does that. Only doing, even a small thing done with full presence, clears more space than 1,000 brilliant ideas trapped in your head. So empty a shelf. Choose one idea, one unfinished piece, one voice you've silenced inside yourself for too long. Don't wait to feel confident. That comes after momentum, not before. Don't wait to be the best. Just be the one who begins. Because every time you act, you sweep the dust off your mental floor. You make room. You breathe clearer. You remember, the silence was never there to store more thoughts, it was there to point you to what matters. And here's the paradox. When you finally stop hoarding ideas, when you commit to doing over-collecting, something incredible happens. New ideas start arriving again. Better ones, sharper ones, and this time, they don't feel heavy, because now, they know they'll be used. You can't take the creative weight with you forever. At some point, you either build with iter, you bury yourself beneath it. So choose. Ship the thing. Share the thing. Say the thing. Not for validation, but for liberation. That's how you clear your mind. That's how you claim your space back. And that's how you remind the world and yourself that you're not just a thinker, you're a creator. Still mind, magnetic life. When your mind is loud, life is complicated. But when your mind is still, life becomes clear. And that clarity is magnetic. You stop chasing, you stop forcing, you stop proving. You start attracting, you start receiving, you start living. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming powerful in a way that's unshakable, because a still mind doesn't mean you're empty. It means you've cleared the noise, so something deeper can finally speak. And when that voice inside you returns, not the voice of anxiety or overthinking, but the voice of knowing, you'll realize something most people never do. You were never broken. You were just buried. Under thought loops. Emotional dust. Dopamine clutter. And good ideas left to rot. But you're here now. And that means you're different. Men like you don't just scroll past these ideas. You feel them. And the reason you feel them is because you're ready to subtract what's been suffocating your potential, ready to reclaim a stillness the world forgot. And when you do, you don't just upgrade your life. You become a mirror for others. You help normalize peace in a world addicted to chaos. You give permission for other mensolent men, smart men. Exhausted mento finally breathe again. That's why this space matters. So, if you believe in what we're building, if you want to make this message louder in a world that won't stop screaming, subscribe. Share it with a brother who needs it. And leave your voice below. Because by doing that, you're not only upgrading your own life, you're helping make this insight accessible to men who are tired of being ignored, tired of performing, tired of the noise. If something in this video made you pause, made you breathe a little deeper, tell us below. You never know who you might inspire just by speaking your truth.